In my opinion, there is not a single wrestling feud that is more overrated than Chris Hero versus CM Punk. And I think a lot of wrestling fans have never heard of this feud before because it occurred before either man had really made a name for themselves. CM Punk eventually going to WWE and becoming their top champion, and Chris Hero eventually becoming heralded as the savior of the indies and one of the gods of early indie wrestling in the 2000s. But these matches do receive a lot of accolade online. If you go onto either wrestler's respective cage match and look at their top 10 matches, you will find their names and their matches 3 times in the top 10 matches, each one receiving a 9.0 rating or better. And really, none of these matches deserve to be ranked as highly as they are because most of them are overly dull, overly long, boring affairs, and I'm going to tell you why. So, to start, I want to give some background on why these matches are formatted the way they are prior to getting into the actual body of the matches. So, Punk and Hero were 2 standouts on the early indie scene of the 2000s, and they are really 2 pillars in what made companies like Ring of Honor, CZW, and PWG important in the early 2000s boom. As the indies were meant to be a substitute for WWF and an alternative for fans who didn't like that style, they had to differentiate themselves from the WWF, and they chose to do that mainly through the construction of their matches, where WWF tried to go for a more character-driven, brawling, short match style. In that time period, the indies elected for longer matches that focused more on a technical mat-based style that focused in importance more on the wrestling that was done in the ring versus the characters who were doing the wrestling. So the popular style of match in the indies at the time was starting out with a slower mat-based exchange before moving into some bigger high-flying moves or some striking exchanges. And this was the style of match that Punk and Hero really tried to incorporate into their repertoire and their body of matches. And obviously, I'm not in a place to criticize either of these 2 gentlemen as wrestlers, considering that they are 2 of the best wrestlers, not just of the indies, but of all time in the industry. But I feel like in 2001 and 2002, when some of these big matches took place, they weren't there yet, and they were really trying to emulate a style that at the time they did not yet have the skills to execute. The first major issue that I have with the Punk versus Hero feud is that every single match they have is just way too long. And there's this idea that's often positive in wrestling that a longer match equals a better match. And while that's not inherently true, you can sort of understand why that idea exists, because a lot of the classic greatest of all time matches are longer, where they jump into that 20 or 30 or 40 minute territory, because in that area you have more room to explore storytelling opportunities. But the only way that really works is if you have wrestlers in there who have the ability to craft a story over that longer period of time. If you want examples of that, you can look at old NWA championship matches with, Ric Flair, Ricky Steamboat, Harley Race, or Barry Windham. Or you can look at the modern AEW hour-long matches with people like Bryan Danielson, MJF, and Adam Page. All these matches work because, yes, while they are long, they continuously hold fan interest by building on things and becoming more dramatic over the course of the match. CM Punk and Chris Hero are not able to do this because they focus too long on chain wrestling, which in actuality is just rest holds. I'm going to give Punk and Hero credit because they really try hard to make rest holds interesting, and if anyone could make a rest hold interesting, it is these 2 guys. But as a concept, a rest hold is just the death of all fun in a pro wrestling match. And watching their 2003 and 2004 exchanges, you can particularly see this. These matches are predominantly made up of headlock takeovers, chin locks, arm ringers, or like body scissors over the course of the match. And that takes up the majority of the match. If you compare this with a wrestler like Bryan Danielson and the hour-long exchanges he had both in AEW and prior to going to WWE in Ring of Honor, you see a very different style. You see him do chain wrestling in the beginning, not rest holds, but chain wrestling, before eventually moving into some heavier strikes and finishing with his signature or finisher moves. That is how a match like this is supposed to properly be formatted. But I don't know if in the early days, Hero and Punk had the skills or the repertoire of moves or just the experience to craft a match like this. And maybe I could be totally talking out of my ass and I could be completely wrong, and they could have created a match like that if they just chose to go down a different direction. But based on what I saw on my screen from the 5 or 6 matches I watched between these guys, the evidence is not there, and I don't think at the time they could have crafted a match like that. So, one of the things that's the most annoying about these matches to me is it seems like they were far more concerned with going a long time in the ring versus creating a great match. It seems like Hero and Punk really wanted to just reach that 60-minute mark in whatever way possible to get wrestling fans in the forums talking versus crafting a great match inside 20 or 30 minutes. And it's so dispiriting to see that as a fan, because when they do eventually get to the striking exchanges and move past the rest holds after the 20, 30, sometimes 40-minute mark in their matches, it is really good. Like, you are seeing two really good wrestlers have a really good wrestling match, but you have to sit through all this schlock at the beginning in order to get there. And it just makes the experience not at all worth sitting through. And if they just went out there and focused on having a great match rather than saying we need to hit an hour or we need to hit 90 minutes, they would have been so much better off. After watching a lot of CM Punk's earlier catalog of matches, I began to think that he used too many rest holds and a lot of his matches really suffered as a result. And while that is true, I don't think it's just a CM Punk problem. I think that problem was everywhere on the indies or in the early 2000s, because they were really trying to go for this style of match that they wanted to be viewed as an epic. And throwing in rest holds was sort of a cheat code to get there. It was like a shortcut to extending your match by 10 or 15 or 20 minutes without actually having to do anything really exciting in it, and in a way to harken back to the old NWA territory matches of the past. But really, it just resulted in a lot of overly long, overly dull matches. And Punk versus Hero, in my mind, is the biggest example of this concept. Two guys who could put on a really great match if they just focused on keeping it tight, in-ring action, strikes, big moves, the things that they're good at, and took out the rest holds, because at the time, they did not have the proper tools to be able to effectively implement those into a match. So overall, I really feel like these matches didn't work for two reasons. Number one, they were just way too long and they didn't have any reason to go that long. And number two, they were too dull and too boring, and they didn't have the continuous building of drama and suspense that is necessary to have a longer match like that. And really, I feel like as a modern wrestling fan, there's no reason to go back and watch these matches, especially since both CM Punk and Chris Hero have such extensive catalogs of great matches that it very much is worth your time to go back and watch. And if you want to know some of those matches, I actually made a video of every must-see CM Punk match, which includes his matches from IWA Mid-South, as well as Ring of Honor, WWE, and AEW. So if you're interested in going back and seeing some great CM Punk matches, go check out that video. But I appreciate you guys watching this video. I've been Isaiah from Hot Tags Wrestling, and if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like or subscribe. If you agree or disagree with anything I said in this video, please leave a comment down below letting me know what you think, and I will be coming out with some more content in the future. I'm coming out very soon with some videos about the G1 Climax that happened this year. I'm also going to be doing some opinion pieces about why I feel CM Punk never had a perfect match and how I personally implement my star rating system. So keep an eye out for those. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.